Morning. Thank you so much for joining in on a reading of Bury Me Home. My name is Sahar, and I'm the playwright and artist who's created this script. If we could all introduce ourselves before we begin the reading, that would be really great, and then we'll move straight into the reading.
Awesome. My name is Yuvika and I'm reading for Samina.
My name is Livia and I'm reading for Hashna.
My name is Venus and I'm reading for Nasreen.
Thank you. Part 1, Introductions. I know you know me, but for the recording's sake, I'm going to say my name. My name is Sahar Ishtiaque Ullah. I was born in 1982 in Fort Lauderdale, USA. What is your name? When were you born? Where were you born?
Ashnera Akhtar Jahan, 1956, Chittagong in a hospital.
Samina Noor, 1970, Chittagong in a hospital.
Nasreen Kudus. I was born in Jessor. I was born at home.
And when were you born, Auntie?
Oh, a long, long time ago, 1950. It's on my Facebook.
Part 2, The Liberation War. Where were you during the 1971 war?
I was first in Fanny. I was in 10th grade when the war started. The schools closed. I went to the village. Then we went back to Fanny, then back to Chittagong. I remember people went to India.
My parents said they took us to the countryside, to the villages. They stayed with family.
I just finished my master's at Dhaka University. We lived in Kakrail.
What do you most remember from that time?
The Rajaka dropped bombs. I still remember the sounds. One bomb would explode and form a lake, a big pond. At night they were falling.
My parents remember hearing the bombs.
There were bombs we could hear every day.
What do you most remember from that time?
I just didn't think those days would come back. Everybody wants to forget.
My mama was Muslim League. My father was Awami League. A lot of refugees stayed at our home.
I don't remember much.
Because you were a baby? Do you remember your parents talking about it, Auntie?
Mostly my mother told stories. I learned about the war in school. In Bangladesh, a lot of people died. That's the sad part. But after the war, they won. We all used to feel great that Bangladesh is an independent country. It was good for a country. When it was under Pakistan, we didn't have a lot of opportunities.
What do you most remember from that time?
My uncle was involved in revolutionary activity. He was arrested in jail until the war ended. I remember the night the war broke out. My aunt jumped across the brick wall. Where she went, we did not know. She was hiding because she was afraid she was going to be arrested too.
What do you most remember from that time?
It lasted for 9 months. It was horrible after that. We basically hid inside our home. We survived on molasses, milk, rice, and lentils. The people in villages suffered so much. My uncle had hired workers from Pakistan. He sheltered them. When all these areas were taken over by the Pakistani army, my uncle was arrested and ordered to be killed. The workers pleaded for his life. He was released. His house was looted. They would come inside and attack people for different reasons. Young women, young men. I remember one day a tank stopping in front of the house. My father was so nervous. He asked my mother for a cup of tea.
He thought it might make him feel better, huh?
It was so funny.
Do you remember when the war was over?
Yes, that time I was in Chittagong. That day my grandpa died. First day the war finished in Dhaka. The next day the war ended in Chittagong. My nana died that day. My mother and father were in Fanny.
Do you remember how you felt?
We were scared. Who was alive? Who died? We were scared. We were happy and we were worried about my mama.
Even though he was a member of the Muslim League, he was against the occupation. He protected people from the Pakistani army, right?
He was a good man. That's why he was saved.
Do you remember when the war was over?
We heard the news. I think it was through BBC News and through Mukti Bahini's news.
Was it by television or radio?
Oh no, dear, we did not have television. I hid my mother's savings under the mattress when the war was over. I took everything out and left 100 taka note inside. There were different reactions from different people. There were mixed feelings. There was a lot of joy, but we didn't know what to expect.
Part 3, Exit. Did you ever think you were going to leave Bangladesh? When did you decide to leave Bangladesh?
I thought I might study abroad and then come back.
I didn't decide to leave. I got married. 1987.
No, I never thought I was going to leave.
Did you ever think you were going to leave Bangladesh? When did you decide to leave Bangladesh?
I got married. 1987. Within 2 months, I came with him. I came as a tourist, and later I applied for a green card. When I was getting married, even then I didn't think. I thought I would finish high school.
1979, we came to America. I married in 1974. We stayed in Dhaka University. We never thought about leaving. When we got married, your daddy applied every year for scholarships. One was for Belgium, one for America. I asked Polash Bai about it. He asked me, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "America." So he said, "Okay, then go there." My father was excited. He was more excited than me.
I left Bangladesh in 1972. I got married. We got married within a week. Those days, we were all programmed to accept this as a common thing. Life had been disrupted by the war. Going to England, it was one step ahead. I never thought it would be hard.
So you went from Dhaka to London to Mosul to Kuala Lumpur. What brought you to the US?
I think your uncle has problem.
Part 4, Arrival. Did you ever imagine you would live in the United States? When did you realize you were not moving back?
My brother was already in America. My father had died. I wanted my mother to come live with us. Things seemed so long ago. Was I that person?
Before marriage, I never imagined I would leave. We watched TV and sitcoms. There was a show called Dallas, McIver's $6 Million Man, Wonder Woman. We had a little idea about America. America was neater than Bangladesh. The roads were nice. The beaches were nice. There's one thing to see on TV, but it's another thing to see it with your own eyes.
When I came, I never thought I wanted to stay. Then your daddy did a PhD. We thought we would stay. Then he applied for a job. Then we stayed. There was no plan.
Did you ever imagine you would live in the United States? When did you realize you were not moving back?
When I got my green card, your dad applied for a green card. We went to visit Bangladesh and we came back. We were still thinking we might go home. If I didn't come with your daddy, he would not have ever stayed. He was scared to be alone. He can't do anything without me.
When I came from Bangladesh, I was in an apartment.
In Miami, right?
Yes, in Miami. It was smaller than our apartment in Bangladesh, but it was neat. I couldn't speak English at all. Most of the things I used to like. Everything seemed beautiful. Like, for example, in the house, there was a vacuum. We didn't have that in Bangladesh. Washing machine, dryer. Maybe those who were rich, they might have had those things. But the middle class, we didn't have those things. We didn't have hot water.
When did you realize you were not moving back?
I knew I would go visit Bangladesh, but I would not stay ever permanently. Once the kids started school, we didn't think we would return. Now our situation is different. If your uncle thinks about it now, I would go back. I always miss home, but my priorities were my kids, their education, your uncle's job. Now they're older, settled down, finished with their studies. But if your uncle doesn't want to go, I wouldn't. I won't go.
When I came here, I was always scared. How are they going to wash my body when I die? Then I wanted to see. A baby had open heart surgery. She died. Her mom was very young. A Maulana received the news. He called your dad and said, "Bring your wife." I brought the parents to our home. Then we dropped them off at their hotel. Then I learned the baby was so beautiful. I have bathed several babies. I bathed your Selim uncle's baby. We bathed all kinds of body. I got more involved. I got more courage. I have washed so many women, but I cannot tell their secrets. We keep their secrets.
Part 5, Death and Burial. In our community, a lot of people talk about wanting to be buried back home. Have you ever felt or wanted that?
I always believed this is a sad situation. 20, 25 years ago, I didn't know how bodies are processed to be sent. Now I know, and I think it is not right. My friend, she was sent back and her own family said, "Why did you send her?" Now, I think if I die, bury me here. If I die visiting Bangladesh, bury me there.
In our community, a lot of people talk about wanting to be buried back home. Have you ever felt or wanted that?
A lot of people, like me, have none of their family members here. They worry about who will visit them. Family members pressure others to send them back. I told your uncle, if anything happens to me, you will bury me here. My husband didn't want to talk about it. I told Tasneem the same. The sad thing is, I've never mentioned this to my sisters. Now, speaking with you, I feel I should be clear.
In our community, a lot of people talk about wanting to be buried back home. Have you ever felt or wanted that?
That was never a question because my mother came to live with me in Boston. I don't know how it came to me, but my mother did not think she was going back. When she died, my brother was in Texas. He came to take her to Bangladesh. I think my mother subconsciously knew she was not going back. She didn't want to go anywhere else. I wanted to buy the plot beside her in Boston. I wanted to be buried beside her. I am here in Florida now. I don't want my body to go to Boston now, although my friends would be very happy.
Have you ever discussed this with your husband or kids?
No, I haven't, but I think they would know, yes. She would like to be buried here. I talk mostly about it with your mom.
If you could choose where you could be buried, where would that be?
I never thought I would move from Sharon. You never know. If Allah wants, I might go to Boston and die there. One of my friends, her husband died in South India while on vacation, and he buried her there, and she came back.
Your own mother is buried here, in America, in Boston. It seems you have permission to be wherever you are. What was the first funeral you attended in the United States?
My mom's funeral is the first I attended in the US and the first the Bangladeshis of Boston attended. If it happens, it will happen. I have enormous faith in Allah.
If you could choose where you could be buried, where would that be?
Makkah or Medina, if I had a choice, that's where.
If you could choose where you could be buried, where would that be?
Makkah or Medina.
What was the first funeral you attended in the United States?
The first one I remember most clearly is when Anu died. It was really unexpected. Anu was really young. It was shocking.
In our community, a lot of people talk about wanting to be buried back home. Have you ever felt or wanted that?
They think if they are buried in Bangladesh, they will go to heaven. That's their country. It's a Muslim country. They don't understand. Before, people didn't understand. I have explained this to our community. They are worried about what happens to the body.
Because you believe the soul can still feel pain for the comfort of the dead?
Where I die, bury me there. That's how it has to be. That's why we have to leave behind rigatons people. If 10 people say you are good, you go to heaven. You can visit a grave wherever you are.
So it's good to be good to the people around you then, right?
Yes, I used to tell my son, I don't want to die here. Send my body to Bangladesh. Anu used to say, when I die, send me too. He used to joke. Now I think I should not have said that. I used to say, why would I send you? This is your country.
What was the most beautiful funeral you saw?
The Maulana, who was taken to prison. When he died, thousands and thousands of people came. I've seen big funerals, but I have not seen one like this. The saddest funeral. A young man's wife died. She was young. She died of cancer. They fell in love with each other and then came here.
During the current pandemic, many people have been unable to attend funerals of loved ones or see them before they died. What does that make you think about?
My father died 2 years ago. I was here.
You couldn't be with him.
The car brought the body from the hospital to our home. Outside the house, that is where he was bathed. Then they took him to the graveyard. If anyone dies, they come home first. Even before the body arrives, the house becomes full, waiting for them. There is mental satisfaction. Here, it is really hard. Sometimes you are alone and have to deal with it on your own.
During the current pandemic, many people have been unable to attend funerals of loved ones or see them before they died. What does that make you think about?
The situation now, we're hearing even immediate family members cannot attend funerals. It is really heartbreaking. I don't really know what we can do. Even here, if you die, no one can visit. Even in Bangladesh, no one can visit.
We do funeral arrangements from home now. I don't go anymore. Those who aren't afraid, they go to bath the dead. People are mostly afraid that nobody will come to visit. For example, Maruf's uncle is sick. We can't visit him. Nobody is going to anybody's house. Nobody's coming to anybody's house. In Bangladesh, a daughter lives on the bottom floor. Parents live above, but they aren't visiting each other. Everywhere is the same.
Part 6, Home. Where is home for you? Did you ever think this is my home?
With my 70 years of life, the most I spent is in Boston. I have lots of homes.
I still never think this is my home. Whenever I go to Bangladesh, I never remember I have a home here. I don't know why.
Home is Bangladesh. Here, my kids are here. My husband is here. That's a tough thing.
Does America ever feel like home for you?
No. Maybe for staying. It is a better place, better opportunities, but I have no family members here.
But you spent most of your life here. It's amazing where our minds go. We think about a time and place where we were loved and surrounded by love.
Now your dad thinks about his childhood, about teaching there. He thinks about his old friends. I just stay here. I don't think this is my home. Whatever I have, I give it to my kids. I know this is your home. You won't leave here.
What about Florida or America do you like the most?
Everything is the same to me.
Part 7. Who are you responsible for? Tell me about the first time you voted in the United States. How did it make you feel?
I think it was Clinton, not the first Bush. I would listen to your uncle. I wouldn't understand. I didn't find interest. For the men, it seems like voting is a really important thing. People who vote, they believe it is their duty.
We got our citizenship when Clinton was president. For my first vote, I registered as independent. I voted for the Democrats. I call them the spineless Democrats. I was annoyed. I was disappointed in his choice for vice president.
I have seen a lot of presidents: Carter, Reagan, Father Bush, Son Bush, Clinton, the black one, Obama, and now the crazy one. Last time I knew the crazy one was going to win. Everything is a mess now. We will mail in our votes.
When people tell you they want to immigrate to the United States, how do you respond?
In this situation, I don't think this government is good to foreigners. I don't think it would be a good decision. Those of us who are here for a long time, we have seen what happened before and what is happening now. If I tell this to those who are in Bangladesh, they will say, you can say that because you live there. Maybe for those who are really struggling in Bangladesh, they might think even this situation is better. Really depends on one situation.
I'll tell them, come over. If you are willing to tolerate insults and work hard. It was never a life of roses. I am a tiny person. I had to be tough both physically and mentally to survive. If I could do it, you could do it. If you want to immigrate, don't expect a field of roses. There are many people who came and didn't like it, and they went back.
I think they are crazy. They have to survive and live first. Then we will see.
Who do you feel responsible for?
Most of my money still goes back home, except for masjids. I give money here. But for poor people, the needy people, because there is no social welfare or anything for them, definitely it goes back home. I cannot shift my ideas here yet the way that maybe I should, but I'm not there. Because I know the poverty, I do now ask your mom about the needy here, and I give her money to give to people here.
Who do you feel responsible for?
I am a housewife. Financially, I can't help anyone. I feel for both Bangladesh and here. Even if I wanted to help my family in Bangladesh, I cannot. So if my neighbors need help, I can help. At some point, you have to let something go. Where we are buried, we don't have a choice. So, where I am, I take the opportunities.
Who do you feel responsible for?
Because I live here, the people here are my first priority. Then Bangladesh. I make money here. I eat here. I live here. They have a right over me. I do it for my blessings. It will go to my grave. I don't think anywhere is my home. Now, I think my real home is where my son is buried. My, that is my real home.
The end. That's it. I'm gonna hit pause now. Okay. Thank you so much for doing that reading. I hope it was an experience. We're going to reflect a little bit about the readings, and I'm going to ask you variations of the questions that I asked the women whose words you read in the script. And these are similar questions that I've asked other readers. And because you're a group of readers who identify as immigrants, I've shifted some of the ways in which I ask this question. Because you have the experience, like these women, of coming from another place outside of where we currently are in the United States. So my first question is just basic introductions. Tell me again your name, either your age or what year you were born, where you were born, and where do you live now?
Sure, my name is Yuvika Dewan. My age is 29 years old. I feel so old. I was born in Baroda, India, and I currently live in Chicago.
My name is Livia. I'm 33. I was born in Ribeirão Preto in Brazil. I live in New York City now.
My name is Venus. I was born in 1982. I'm 37. I was born in Bocholt, Germany. and I live in New York City now.
Thank you. My second question is, we read like the aunties, you know, they all come from Bangladesh and they came at varying stages of their lives. So I'm going to ask you, where did you immigrate from before coming, immediately before coming to the US? And when did that happen? And why did you make that decision?
Immediately before coming to the US, I was actually in Singapore. So that's like the direct immigration from there. I came here for school. My parents really wanted me to leave the country because they didn't think that I would succeed there professionally.
So I came straight from Brazil in July 2015. And I came to do a master degree.
So my story is a little different. My parents left Afghanistan in 1980, and so they were refugees from Afghanistan to Germany. And I was born basically in a refugee encampment in Germany. And we ended up coming to the United States in 1989 from Germany. And my parents came because they had, although my father's family lived in Germany, my mother was very isolated, and so she wanted to come to the US to be closer to her family.
Thank you. I asked the aunties and my mom to describe their memories, what they could remember of the 1971 war, because that was the event of their generation, the war for independence. And so I'm going to ask you, what would you say is the event of your parents' generation, of your mother's generation?
For me, it's actually a little bit unique to hear that question, and I can't think of any events from my parents' generation that really impacted us as a family.
In our case, I think it would be the dictatorship in Brazil. Not that I was born, but I think it's for their generation was a very important event.
What, you know, what year it began or what decade?
1964 to 1984.
Do they share stories about how their lives might have shifted during that time?
Yes, it was a very tough time. A lot of oppression, torture, people missing. I got uncles that they went to jail and they got tortured, but not my mom and my dad. But yeah, it was hard times.
So it's a part of like family memory, right? Like it's a conversation people had.
It's part of the country memory, although the present president tries to deny the existence of it. It is part of the country's history. Yeah.
For us, it's definitely the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, 1979.
Your parents ever share any memories from that? Because I know like you read for Nasreen, and Nasreen, so I did a reading with the children of the women. And what was really interesting is like the daughters, they said, yeah, like we talk about this with our dad and our mom all the time. Nasreen has two sons. So I had her son do a reading. And Nasreen told me, Auntie, she told me, my son doesn't know anything. And then when I asked him about the stories that his mother shared, he said, you know, I've never heard her tell these stories. And even like during our conversation, she paused and she said that line that I kept in there, like, I didn't think those days would come back, right? I couldn't remember it. So did your mother ever share stories about the 1979 invasion with you?
Yeah, I mean, there are different factions within the country, so different families had different experiences. So there, this is as is the case in most, invasion type of experiences where even coups and things like that, right? Where certain groups are aligned with the oppressor, some other groups are not, and there's all these like skirmishes within. So the thing that she said was the hardest was that um, there were groups that were specifically targeting my father and kind of the political group that he was a part of. And so, and my grandfather was a part of that group, and everybody basically on my father's side was part of that group. And so her experience was that they had to leave as soon as possible because my cousin's father, who was also part of that group, was jailed and he was killed in jail ultimately. But so they were pursuing, they're looking for my father and his father, and so they were able to get out very very early on. Whereas my grandmother and my grandfather, they left a couple years later. So like the younger men had to leave early. The young, kind of, and just because they were just pursued to join, uh, usually in these cases, men are the ones who are kind of either killed or captured or asked to join their their movement. But my mom was saying that their experience was particularly challenging because they had to leave right away because they were just being sought after. Yeah. So that was kind of the most telling. And also, she herself had such a hard life like prior to the invasion. So, um, so a lot of her stories were around lost dreams. And so not just related to, having to leave and come to Germany, but also just having gotten married to my father and losing a lot of the dreams that she had because of that experience. So her experiences were a little more complicated, I think.
Um, so this is a difficult question, and I was able to ask the aunties this because in our community, like my mother does the burials, and so I grew up always hearing people in my house talking about it because like they come to my parents and discuss like where they would like to be buried, and they'd have conversations, and sometimes people would have fights. And I remember as a kid, hearing fights about where bodies should be sent after the fact, right? Because there was no conversation. Um, so my question to all of you is, have you ever had this conversation with your family and friends, either here or wherever your family is and friends are, about where you would like to be buried should anything happen to you?
Yeah, so I've never had this conversation with my parents or family members about what happens when if I died. And in our culture, we would be cremated.
Right.
So I'm guessing that if it were to happen, I would be cremated where I died, and then the ashes would be taken back home. And some holy river that I don't know where they would decide to do that. Yeah.
No, I've never discussed that. I recently lost my grandmother and was the first person I buried from afar. So I have no idea.
Yeah, I growing up, this was something that we talked about a lot because a lot of people were sending their parents to Afghanistan to be buried, despite it being like during Taliban times and things were really chaotic and crazy. But it was still like a deep desire for a lot of these people to be buried at home. Um, but it's so my family was like they were huge proponents of like being buried where you live or where you die. And so when my grandfather died in 2000, he my family like buried him much quicker than a lot of the other families. Like, you know, they would take a whole week to like do the funeral and to like do all these other rituals. And my family was like, nope, we're gonna try to follow the religious rules of trying to get him buried as soon as possible. And he ended up getting buried the next day. So he died in the evening, and the next morning he was taken to be buried. And so that's something that my husband and I have talked about too. Like, okay, where do we get, what we joke about it actually. We're like, okay, we can't die here in New York because we don't have any family who's going to pray for us. So we're like, well, we have to at least move move somewhere else and then die there. So just kind of like joking about it. But, we're definitely aware that, wherever we die is where we're going to get buried.
What I found really interesting in our conversations, and I didn't like transcribe everything that's in the script, is how clear of a memory the women had about the first deaths of loved ones that were from afar, right? Like they couldn't go, they couldn't. And I was thinking about what Livia said about the first time I buried someone from afar, right? Like the first time you mourned someone, right, from afar. And they had very clear memories of that, like they could identify. And they also had, I asked about in the US, who did they bury? Who was the first funeral that they attended? They had clear memories of that as well. And I think it was a turning point for them in like their immigration story, right? Like, because for so long, I mean, you heard the women, they said they felt, they still feel that at least two of them said, this is not home. They feel very unsettled, even though they spent most of their lives here. And I thought it was really interesting, like Nasreen Auntie, because she witnessed her own mother, right? Her own mother, like it's like her mother was modeling for her, right? Like what was possible for her. And it was very different for the other two women. So the next question is, as you're reading the script, could you imagine any of your elders, if not your mother, any of your elders saying some of the things that these women were saying? And you can pull up the script and look through it. Are there any lines that you're like, yeah, I could see so-and-so saying this in my life? And what is that line? What was the lines that you could imagine your elders saying?
Yeah, let me look for it real quick. There was a section about voting, and I definitely know that once when I was having this conversation with my parents, and they're still in India, about voting and who they would vote for and why, and my mom would always just say I would just vote for whichever party or person that my dad would vote for, no questions asked. And I would challenge her and I would ask her, why do you say that? And she would just say that, I don't know, just do that. And so I think that's one of the women, or maybe more than one, said that. And I was like, yeah, that's like my mom. And then the other thing that a lot of women were mentioning, or actually Samina's character said it very clearly, that, why did you move here? And she said, I moved here because I got married. And it wasn't really her decision, but she took it and like took it gracefully. And same with my mom. I asked her, like, why do you live in this particular city out of all the cities in the country? And she's like, I just got married. That's just the fact of life. And I go where my husband or my family takes me. So it feels like there's less agency. My mom has a lot of power, but in other areas, in some areas, she has less agency and she doesn't even know what that looks like because she didn't grow up with that idea.
My case, not really. I would see maybe myself saying a few things about home, and that the US is never home, but not really my mom or my elders, because they're all back in Brazil. And yeah, I saw myself more than them, in terms of that feeling of never really feeling home here.
Yeah, for me, I don't think there was a particular character that I think my mom would kind of connect with. I think I feel like there's a strength in each of these women, that, and I feel like my mother for years has been so passive, and that it's really hard for her to, you know, have her own, like, you know, what Yuvika, you were talking about your mother, that, you know, yes, there is a passivity, but there's also a strength. And although, you know, I do believe my mother has strength, I feel like when it comes to major decisions, when it comes to, you know, ideas of like what, you know, what she wants to do for burial, like she'll, like when she gets angry she'll say, well, just bury me wherever, you know. She'll just get like upset, but it's not what she really wants, you know. And so I think it's really hard, when you've gone through such hardship in your life, to be able to identify, um, you know, what your wants are. And so sometimes I try to ask her, like, so, like, what do you want in this regard or that, and she really doesn't have an answer. And so that's where I was able to kind of, it made me sad to kind of go through, you know, after you asked the question, I kind of went through it in my mind. I was like, wait, I don't think it really connects with any of the characters, because her experiences, I think, yeah, her experiences are very different, and the way she thinks is very different.
So now I'm going to ask all of you the same question that I asked the ladies. If someone were to reach out to you now, considering what we know about the pandemic and how this government is handling the pandemic, um, and all the things that this has revealed for us about different structures and systems in the United States, and also considering the current uprisings across the country for Black lives. And if someone were to reach out to you, say social media or like a family member, and were to say like, hey, I want to come to the US, I want to immigrate, how would you respond?
I'm very critical of the current situations in like the health crisis and the politics, and you know, everything that's going on here is much worse than what's happening in other countries. And I would still, if somebody really wants to come here, I would, I've learned how to, you know, internalize the fact that when I came here, things weren't so bad. I came here in 2009, and I was able to, you know, I was able to feel safe, and I was able to find the structures that helped me settle in and understand myself and understand the landscape. So I know that this is temporary. So if somebody did ask me, I would say yes. You know, caution. These are the issues you will deal with. But yes, you should. It is going to give you a chance at something that maybe you're missing back home. My brother, coincidentally, is looking to move here. He's still in India, and I'm helping him out. Um, and I do think people can get a better life if they follow all the, you know, things that, you know, they should be cautious about. I think they can really do well here.
I would say run. don't don't come. I'm trying to get out. It's it's a mess. It's terrible. You're not ever welcome. You're treated like shit. And no, just but I'm in a very bad mood with the country since I moved. So for me, it's just not worth it. I don't have my family here. I don't have the people I love here, and I only get the treatment from the government and everything. So no, run, 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 run.
I don't know. I've been thinking about this. You know, I was thinking about the question of like, do you consider this your home? And that was such a struggle growing up, as whether this is home or not. And ironically, I was considered stateless, from the time I came here till, what is it, 2008 or 9. So it was like literally, I didn't know where I belonged. And my family struggled a lot more with like green card and citizenship, more so than anybody else. Like, I'm talking about the Afghan community. A lot of Afghans who came as refugees got their green card very quickly. and then, you know, started getting government assistance and all of that. And we didn't, because we came from Germany. So, you know, our case was pending for years and years and years. And so it was a very challenging experience. So when somebody wants to come here, I'm like, well, I mean, sure, if you want to, you know, like, it, you know, like, you know, being able to, like, when I talk to people who were born and raised here, I'm like, yeah, like, you had it easy. Like, you didn't have to worry about, you know. And I have a lot of patients who are, you know, H-1B visa holders, and you know, those who are seeking green cards. And I'm just like, this is such a pain. You know, you're sacrificing so much. And right now, a lot of the students, the international students, are going through ups and downs. And I'm just like, why do you want to go through all of this? Is it really worth it? So if they feel like it's worth it, then certainly go for it. But know that you're going to jump through a million different hoops, and, you know, it's going to be really tough. Um, and so, my husband always jokes, because he's Mexican. He's like, I'm the Mexican. I don't know why you went through all these, like, immigration issues and stuff. I'm like, you know, it's tough, but I'm happy that, you know, our child doesn't have to go through, you know, that stuff. But I know she's going to go through, you know, being othered, you know, throughout her life, because she isn't, you know, what, you know, America would deem to be, you know, the privileged class or the privileged group. So,
So you all took, like, basically varying positions of the lady. Like, Yuvia and Venus are between Nasreen and Samina, and Livia is Hasna. Like, no, you crazy. You crazy. Samina was like, I mean, right now it's not so good, but I guess it depends on your situation. And Nasreen's like, come on over. You're going to get your butt kicked, but come on over. So now the final question, our session is done. So the final question that I'm going to ask you is, after reading the script, I asked you to do a free write. So we're going to go back to that free write. After reading this, or while you're reading it, how did you respond? Like, what were you feeling, or what struck you? What are the themes that maybe stayed with you? What was challenging?
So the first feeling that I had was like this awkwardness, because I was reading something very personal about somebody, and they were sharing, and I felt like, you know, should I be knowing all these details? And then the second feeling was just like a lot of heaviness, because even though some of the lines were really matter of fact, like, oh, I got married, or, oh, like, this is what I think about getting where I want to get buried. The line seemed really matter of fact, but the emotion behind it seemed really heavy. And, you know, like, it, you know, if it's almost like I was talking to them, not reading their lines. And I wrote this down. I can relate to a lot of these people. Like, I could see myself going up and having a really deep conversation with them. And I just, yeah, that was awkwardness and sadness, the two main feelings I felt going through this process.
So I wrote a bunch of words, actually. So I started with emotions, family, home. Where should we go? Where are we? How do we feel? Feelings, death, funerals, family, sense of familiarity, being in community, acceptance, tough, resistance, resilience. And I also felt very touched and thankful for the opportunity to be a part of this story a little bit, even if for a few minutes. It was an honor to be part of it, and I felt very humbling to, you know, allow me and us to enter this space so intimate and so important in their lives. So it was really touching.
I connected a lot with the idea of not wanting to leave your home, and the idea of wanting to go back, and how the characters talked about, like, oh, this is temporary, we're going to go back, because that's how, that's how, you know, that's what a lot of Afghans felt when they left Afghanistan. And that's a lot of the stories that we heard, that we're going to go back. This is temporary. And a lot of people didn't realize that they were going to stay for a really, really long time. And that to me is so powerful, because, you know, I wrote that, you know, some Americans, you know, people like Trump, they think that, you know, all immigrants and refugees are dying to come to the US to take over everything. But that's not the case. You know, some people have to come. They have no choice, and they have a deep, deep love for their country, and you know they have to come, or they choose to, whatever their reasons are. But you know, the assumptions around that just get me so emotional, that you know, people aren't just dying to come and take your resources, and you know, they're also contributing, but they're also, you know, they're connected to their homelands. And you know, towards the end I noticed like a heaviness in my chest, and that's often when you know, there's some kind of emotion kind of brewing. And you know, it wasn't like sadness, it was kind of like a combination of like, you know, a deep connection to the story and what you know, these women were experiencing, as well as kind of my own emotions around, you know, connecting it to um, you know, my family's experience.
I am so happy that we could do this. Thank you so much. Thank you for indulging me, and sharing your stories and being a part of this, what I'm calling an intergenerational conversation. I will send you the links when the archive goes public. There's also going to be a virtual watch party to celebrate all the artists who are part of the 100 Years, 100 Women project. And they're amazing. All of them are amazing. Um, and so I'm really grateful for you. I hope you have a wonderful day. It's day, right? And rest of the week, and we'll stay in touch. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice
Thank
meeting
you.
you all. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.